بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا وقدوتنا محمد عليه أفضل الصلاة وأزكى تسليم. اللهم علمنا بما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما يا رب العالمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Everybody, on this blessed day of Ashura, 10th of Muharram, 1443, welcome to our class that's dedicated to the ladies of our community, where we're going through Riyadh al-Saliheen and taking any sorts of questions that might come up. So today is a new day. We get to start a new chapter. Walillahi alhamd. The chapter on truthfulness. Babu as-sidqi. Babu sidqi. Sidq. Truthfulness. As is the style of our illustrious author, Al-Imam An-Nawawi, rahimahullah ta'ala, he begins every chapter with quotes from the Quran. So he says, قال الله تعالى, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم, يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وكونوا مع الصادقين. This is in Surah At-Tawbah, verse 119. وقال تعالى والصادقين والصادقات, from Surah Al-Ahzab. That there's more context to that verse. وقال تعالى فلو صدقوا الله لكان خيرا لهم, and that's Surah Muhammad. As for the interpretation of these ayahs that Imam An-Nawawi brings, he says, Allah Almighty says, O you who believe, be afraid of Allah and be with those who are true, as-sadiqeen. The second quotation from Surah Al-Ahzab, the men and women who are truthful. And this is part of a larger ayah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is promising them their reward. So he's naming a long list of different positive qualities, and one of those qualities is that they are truthful. And then finally, the ayah in Surah Muhammad, then if they had been true to Allah, it would have been better for them. The first ayah in Surah At-Tawbah, be afraid of Allah, have fear of Allah, have taqwa of Allah, and be with those who are true. Where can we find those people? That's a question to you all. Where should we go? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded us to be with people who are true. We should ask why, and we should ask how. Let's answer those two questions together. Why should we be with those who are truthful? What are the benefits of being around those who are truthful? And how do we do it? Let's say that we're convinced, okay, we want to be with the people who are truthful, just like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said. What's going to change? How are we going to go about doing that? Who has an answer? Okay. So, as for the why, helps us in our own qualities. Why does it help us in our own qualities to be around people who are truthful? What's going to happen? Yes, bring out the good in us. It's going to set an example for us. It's going to create some peer pressure. It's going to all these sorts of things. You know, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, be with the truthful, what comes to mind first is kind of our friends and our family and things like that. And that's fairly obvious. We don't want to be around people who lie or say untruthful things or even believe in untruthful things. But if we're talking about the reason being because we're concerned about the influences over ourselves, then this would extend, or it would seem to extend, to every type of influence on us. If we are looking at how we spend our day, 24 hours, okay, we spend between 6 and 8 of it sleeping, and on non-fasting days, maybe however many hours eating, and we have work and we have this and we have that, and then we zone out on social media, and then we're on Netflix, and then we're whatever we're doing. If we take that into account, are we also being with the truthful? Is there a relationship with the things that we view in terms of television, in terms of media, in terms of articles that we read, in terms of news, in terms of forward messages, right? I know the aunties are great with the forward messages, right? How much of our day is spent being with the truthful, and how much of the day is spent being with the doubtful, and how much of the day is spent being with the untruthful, right? This is the importance. And if you look at the Sharia in a broad frame, right? The Sharia places a lot of importance about sha'a'illah, right? The signs of Allah, the masjid, the minarets, the adhan, the Eid outside, and right, public, yes, public religion, because all religion is public, despite what some people imagine. In order to have influence, because we need to make sure that Islam has influence over the lives of us and the lives of over our children. And we need to make sure that we are being influenced by the proper channels, whether that's media, whether that's friends, whether that's teachers, whether that's books. There is a real shortage of quality fiction for young adults and adolescents. Once they get out of the board books and out of the very, very short books, we're talking about getting into chapter books, right? Chapter books that would meet this criteria, kunu ma'a sadiqeen, are very few. That has an effect. We have, and we're going to mention this in the khutbah tomorrow, inshallah ta'ala, where almost every parent-child relationship is depicted as toxic in some way. The parents just don't understand. The parents are overbearing. The child needs to break free from them and liberate themselves and explore, etc., etc. This is not kunu ma'a sadiqeen. This is not spending time with the truthful. This is a lie. This sort of depiction, or the depiction of love. Love is love. You know, it's just people who should be able to love who they want. You know, that's something we can talk about all day. All these sorts of lies that exist out in our society. Kunu ma'a sadiqeen. Be with the truthful, the people who speak the truth, the influences that are truthful. And if that applies to us, then of course that should apply to our children as well. So then we get into it, the hadith. The first one, number 54 of the whole book, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu said, the Prophet ﷺ said, truth leads to piety. Al-bir is the word that we're using here for piety. And piety leads to Jannah. A person persists in speaking the truth till he is enrolled or registered with Allah Azza wa Jal as a truthful person. Falsehood leads to vice. Al-kadhib yahdi ilal fujur. Fujur is what we're saying is vice, which fujur is a little bit stronger than vice in my opinion. And vice leads to the fire. And a person will persist in telling lies until he is enrolled or registered with Allah as a liar. One of the things that is central to our religion and all traditional teachings before our very, very recent modern era is that there is a fundamental difference between what you do and who you are. There is a fundamental difference between what you do and who you are. And that is on display through implication in this hadith. The Prophet ﷺ said that a person will persist in speaking the truth. Verb, action, what you do, until he is enrolled or registered with Allah Azza wa Jal as a truthful person, who you are. We do not simply come out of the womb as fixed people. Even if every single one of us is allotted or apportioned a certain amount of fitna or trial, something that we struggle with. We're not fixed. We have a relationship of ebb and flow, waxing and waning with our actions, which reflect the choices that we make. But there is a point after which we've chosen and chosen and chosen and chosen and chosen a certain action over and over and over again, that then it becomes who we are. In the sense that it is so essential to us that it is almost impossible to give it up or to leave it. The import of this hadith should be fairly obvious. When we have many things that are being litigated in society, such as homosexual relationships, such as non-binary gender definitions, such as gender transitions, all these sorts of things. Many of them are predicated on an idea of fixity. That something is fixed in our nature and it cannot change, and it has no relationship with what we do. I am this way. This is who I am. If you do not let me pursue my pleasure, if you do not let me act on my desire or my wish, you are denying who I am. And in today's language, then that's trauma, that's violence, that's etc., etc., etc. Our tradition would say, not so fast. There is a fundamental difference between who you are and what you do. And who you are is not made up of your desires. You are not a body that just happens to have a soul, as this is a well-known quote. You are a soul that happens to have a body. And the body is this arena of all these sorts of different emotions, some of them noble, some of them ignoble, some of them suggestions of good, some of them suggestions of evil. And it is disingenuous to attempt to suggest that any sort of desire any sort of inkling or wish that we have that arises within us is part of our essential self, part of who I am. And you may not deny me the exercise of that pleasure or the fulfillment of that wish. And everybody knows this, even if they're not living according to it, even if they're not consistent. And how we can tell that people know this is that this is what they would never accept this type of logic with other sorts of things. If we're talking about cheating on our spouses, if we're talking about stealing, if we're talking about any other sort of thing that is still, walillahi alhamd, disapproved of in our society, then nobody would accept as an argument of justification, this is who I am. I came out this way. I was naturally born with this particular desire. And to deny me the fulfillment of that desire is tantamount to denying my right to exist at all. But through money and influence, this particular da'wah, this particular argument has gotten a lot of traction, and we ask Allah to preserve us and our families and protect us. Ameen. So the Prophet ﷺ lays it out here. Habitus, as was called by Aristotle, habitus is real, right? The majority of us are a mixture of good and bad things, good and bad inclinations, good and bad suggestions. And it's the choices that we make that determine what's the next step ahead for us. Because it's easier to walk forwards than it is backwards, right? So if you start walking forwards, the path of least resistance, the easier way is to keep going forwards. It takes more effort to turn around 180 and then walk the other way. So this is what this hadith teaches us, that everything that you choose, it's an isolated choice, yes. It will be rewarded or punished according to Allah's wisdom, yes. But it also makes the way easier. It makes the way easier for your next decision. It tips the scale towards that decision the next time you have to make a similar decision. If you're honest, if you're a truth teller, if you tell the truth, then you have tipped the scale towards the truth. And next time you have the opportunity or the dilemma, whether to tell a convenient lie or whether to tell an inconvenient truth, then it will be easier for you to choose to tell that truth. Whereas if you chose, to tell the inconvenience, I'm getting mixed up here. If you chose to tell the convenience lie, the self-serving lie, then you have worn that path just a little bit more. And the next time you come across a similar dilemma, then you will be a little bit more likely to choose to again tell the convenient self-serving lie. And this happens on and on and on until you've gone to the point where it's too far to turn back one way or the other. Either you've been written amongst the people of paradise or you've been written among the people of the hellfire. And we ask Allah for salama and afiyah. The next hadith on the authority of Hassan ibn Ali radiallahu anhuma, from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, very, very famous hadith, da' ma yaribuka ila ma la yaribuka. Give up what is doubtful to you for that which is not doubtful to you. فَإِنَّ الصِّدْقَ طُمَأْنِينَةٌ وَالْكَذِبَ رِيبَةٌ. For certainly truth is peace of mind, and falsehood is doubt. Give up what is doubtful and causes you doubt. Give it up for that which does not cause those doubts. This hadith of the Prophet ﷺ is a very well-known concept. It has to do with proving that we all have this nafsul lawwama, this part of our soul that is our conscience, that calls us to good, that calls us to obedience. The little voice in the back of our heads, as we say in the English idiom, that really knows what's right deep down, that won't be fooled by all this kind of rationalization that we do to justify the convenient self-serving lies that we tell. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Taha, he said that the person who turns away from remembrance, his life is bunk, restricted. He doesn't enjoy it. Don't think that the Fir'auns of the world are just living a life of bliss and pleasure and ease. It might seem that way. They certainly have the riches to seem that way. But that's not what's really the internal situation. They are racked with guilt. They are racked with doubts. They are racked with paranoia, as we see so many times in tyrants. Because that which they're doing, to be generous would be to say doubtful. They're always looking over their shoulder. Have you ever talked to somebody about something and they kind of like, they're acting really suspicious? Like they're already assuming that you're about to accuse them of something. And so they start defending themselves before you even thought to accuse them. It reminds me back when I was just a new Muslim, I worked in restaurants. And this one restaurant I worked in, we were something of an upper class restaurant. We did not do delivery, right? Sort of thing. But there was one particular person who was well known, apparently, to a notorious customer, who was rumored to be faking sort of these physical injuries in order to get people to bring her takeout order to the car. Okay, so I was new there, and so came and they told me, say, listen, okay, we don't normally do this for anybody, but this such and such a person, just take it out to their car or whatever. And there was kind of this understanding that this person was kind of lying or not being truthful, And I was like, well, that's really, I was the naive guy. I was like, well, that's really weird. Why would people assume that this person was lying? Why would they assume that this person was dishonest? Why don't they just take them at their word? And so I bring the food out to this person, and I get to the car, and the first thing that they say is, you see, I have my crutches right here in the back. As if I was going to investigate, and kind of, doubt their status as an injured person. And that was very suspicious. And that made me also say to myself, okay, so maybe everyone else is right. Maybe this person is not being very forthcoming or honest with their health, just to sort of get a little favor, whatever. But you see, such a person, take that person in the car who's, what are they thinking? What's their existence like? While they're waiting, they're talking to the person in the restaurant on the phone, they're placing their order, they're waiting for the person to come out. Are they just like completely relaxed, hanging out and chilling and, not a care in the world? No, they're afraid they're going to get caught. They're afraid someone's going to call them out. They're thinking and thinking and thinking about, oh, what's the story I'm going to tell? Are there any holes in my story? I have to cover this, and no, I have to account for that. Bring my props or whatever. That's not a peaceful life. That's the life of bunk. That's the life of doubt. That's the life of when you still have a conscience, the conscience tries to hold you accountable. And so the Prophet ﷺ is just saying, listen, if you find yourself in that situation where your own internal speech is on overdrive because you're thinking how other people are looking at you, and you are, really, really worried that, oh, someone's going to say something, and what, and how should I respond, and et cetera, then you should probably not be involved in that thing in the first place, right? You probably shouldn't be involved in that thing in the first place. That's an indication that you have, yes, your heart is alive, alhamdulillah, and that it's telling you you should stop. And you should listen to that voice, because if you stop, just like our last hadith taught us with Habitus, the idea of, the decisions that you make create a momentum. If you choose to ignore that voice enough times, you might get to the point where that voice stops speaking, or you can't even hear that voice anymore. And so the Prophet ﷺ says, if there's something that causes you doubt, then leave it. Then get out of it, then refrain from it, and go to something that doesn't cause you to doubt. And gives us a wonderful universal principle. It says that truthfulness is peace of mind. If you're telling the truth, the person who tells the truth, they sleep well at night. There's nothing, that internal speech, that internal interrogation, those imaginary conversations, they're not concerned. They are clear between them and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They told the truth. They have nothing to worry about. Whereas the person who is lying, theirs is the life of doubt. I see the battery on my device is almost out. I need to make sure this is plugged into the wall. Just a second. Any questions that you have, please put them in the chat box. Okay, so let's have one more hadith. It's just about time to break fast. Why don't we stop for today for all those who are fasting? Any questions? Okay then, inshallah ta'ala, we will see you next time. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.